Yeah, well, first of all, I think, well, we all know that research and policy are two different fields, two different systems. They are loosely connected, but obviously then there may be tensions. What I see as opportunities is that really research can bring evidence into policies, can provide models, concepts that can be used, especially in that field of ESER network. When we think about the implementation of environmental education, sustainability education, I think research has contributed a lot in providing different concepts of ESD, competence models, etc., that then have been taken up by policy. For example, when I speak about the German case, for example, in the state where my university, University of Fechter, is located, we have a strong policy on ESD that really brings ESD into school education in the state of Lower Saxony. And there, it's very obvious that that policy is based a lot on the whole institution approach, the competence models that, for example, German researcher Gerhard de Haan has provided. So I think that is great that research there can play a role for really providing input, evidence, the basis for good policy. On the other hand, obviously, research wouldn't be able as such to make ESD implemented in the system. Therefore, it needs policies, it needs policy at the state level, at the level of different institutions. So I think both is important, and obviously it works much better if there is cooperation. On the other hand, obviously there can be tensions. Sometimes policy really expects very fast answers, expects that research really provides the answers, how it can be done now, immediately, fast. And also sometimes maybe policy brings a very normative approach that then by research could be taken up, but obviously and perhaps cannot be taken up in that way. Sometimes also policy tries to how would I say, to move over or to give questions to research that are not necessarily scientific questions, but would have to be solved in at the policy level. For example, if there is that problem that change, that transformation is very low, and we often see that also in terms of climate change, etc. Many people, also politicians, complain that change is too slow, and then sometimes politicians say, yeah, well, that should be solved by research, that should be solved by education, while we may say that it is mainly a political issue, that it is not faster. So therefore, I would say that sometimes it also can be difficult to cooperate. There may be misunderstandings. There may be a mixing up of the different roles. Research may become also too political, too normative in some contexts. And that is also true for funding. I don't know how it is in all the other European countries, but at least in Germany, ESD research depends a lot on public funding. Sometimes the university, that's also the case at my university, University of Fechter, we have a very limited budget at our own university. So for doing real research, I always need external funding, and often external funding is linked to political programs. So it can be a very normative context in which we can provide our ideas. And that obviously means that research sometimes cannot be so open as it should be. We cannot be so flexible just to choose any research question that we think that is most important, but have to adopt or adapt our research to what policy is asking for at that moment. And I think that's true for many countries, that research is depending a lot on external funding, and external funding not always, but often is not only, the programs are not only framed by research interests, but also by political interests. And that can be good or can be okay, but often it also can be a problem if then perhaps the most important research questions are not dealt with because the political interest is another one. Yeah, I think we can see what I said before about that research provides concepts and models, etc. I think we can see it very well in the Greencomp framework, because there it was exactly like that, that the European Union, that the people leading that, the creation of that framework, invited to different sessions, created a space for debate and dialogue, and also did a literature review of the papers, publications that are there, and then they really tried to bring together and to summarize what we know about sustainability competencies. And first of all, I would say I think they did a very good job, because they really invited many important people that can contribute to that debate. And they, I think, included the most important documents, and we can see it in the framework that it really includes many important ideas, many important elements. When we compare it to other sustainability competence frameworks that have been published by, for example, Arnim Wieck and others, or other people, including myself, then we see that many of our ideas that we are discussing in research, in the research context, have been included in that Greencomp framework. So from that perspective, I would say there the science policy collaboration has worked quite well, and has led to a quite good framework, I would say. On the other hand, obviously, also here we can see that the Greencomp framework is part of the Green New Deal policy from the European Union. What is on the one hand quite important, because it has brought sustainability or more into the European context, also the policy for greening the economy. That is important on the one hand. On the other hand, especially more radical or more voices more oriented to real transformation may argue that still the Green New Deal is not transformative enough, still is related too much to growth, etc. And obviously, then we have to discuss in our context, is that also reflected in that competence framework, and how far that competence framework is linked to perhaps normative ideas that may also influence our research and our pedagogical work. Although I would say that those ideas of growth and economic growth are even not so much reflected in that framework, but what we can see for sure, that it is much more normative than normally perhaps those competence frameworks are. I want to give an example here. We have there that value competence field, and I think that is very important, and that is part of many competence frameworks. If we take, for example, the framework published by Arnim Wieck and others, there also the values competence or the normative competence is one of the important competencies. So I like very much that also the Greencomp framework takes up that part of sustainability values. But when we then look into the details, we see that they first have that valuing sustainability competence, what is, I think, quite similar to the normative competence in other frameworks. But then they add also the supporting fairness competence and the promoting nature competence. And there I would ask critically a little bit, is that really competencies? I mean, it links quite well to the work of Harold Glasser from the United States, because he in his competence frameworks also included this idea of promoting nature. But I can remember contexts where we discussed, for example, Arnim Wieck and Rieckmann and others. We discussed also with Harold Glasser about that question, asking, isn't that too normative? Is promoting nature really a competence, or is it a value what obviously can take or can have a role in sustainability education, but perhaps we should be careful not to mix up too much competencies on the one hand and values on the other. Obviously, that is interlinked. It's not two different parts. But for example, in my work, I try to separate it a little bit. I speak about competence development. I speak about values education, and I link it to each other. But still, I see it as two separate fields. And the Greencomp framework, I think, really mixes it up. for example, by including those supporting fairness and promoting nature competencies. What does not mean that I wouldn't say that those fields are not important. Obviously, with young people, we should talk about justice. We should open up spaces where they can learn about equity, where they can learn about the importance of nature. But as I said before, I'm not so much sure if that is really competency. So, and that means in the end, I think that the Greencomp framework is important, and I think it's really good also because it has been taken up by many people, and not only in research, also in educational policy, and that is great. If in the end, in more European countries, in more schools, universities, early childhood institutions, the green or the sustainability competencies are seen and are used as part of pedagogical work, that is great. And so I would say that is a big plus for the Greencomp framework, that it has contributed to really disseminating the idea of sustainability skills and competencies. On the other hand, I really would say we have to be careful, especially in research. For example, if I now would again do a project on sustainability competencies, or especially, for example, on sustainability competence assessment, I would not take the competencies as they are, because I think they are good for that political context. But in research, as I said, and there are more, it's not only the two I mentioned. I think there are more competencies where we can discuss, is it really competencies? Is it really good to include them in a competence framework that we want to use for research? So again, I would say, as I said before, it's good that we have here that collaboration. It's also good to use the Greencomp framework in our context. But as soon as we really want to use it for research, I would like to be a bit critical if we can use it as it is, or if it's also necessary to perhaps exclude some parts, or to put some parts in a different to see them from a different perspective, for example.